herzlich willkommen bei einer neuen Ausgabe von Schieders Melange. Heutiger Gast ist Raphaël Glucksmann und daher wechseln wir auch gleich mal auf Englisch.
Ja.
Hello Raphaël.
Hallo. Ich habe mein Deutsch vergessen.
Ja, und I have still not learned my French, so maybe the compromise can be simply medium English. Today, maybe we could discuss a little bit of also disinformation, the war in Ukraine. We have to say we record this melange when the war, Russian Putin's war on Ukraine is 1 month already lasting. But maybe first to introduce you a little bit. You are a member of the European Parliament also since the last elections.
Yes.
Like myself.
So we are newcomers, full of ideals and hope and enthusiasm.
Yeah,
yes?
and then still empty of disappointment.
Yes, exactly. We didn't become cynical yet.
Not in the Parliament, yeah. No, and also you're French, Parisian, I think.
Yes.
But there exist also other cities in France. But
yeah, I mean, sometimes French tend to forget it. But yeah, France is a country. It's not only one town. But you know, we live in a very strange democracy, which is also has some tendency to be monarchical and very centralized.
Maybe we can come to this point also because in a few weeks even, there's French election, presidential election too. But also you had been working before, let's say, in the field of making films, making reportages and things like this, but with a strong point on human rights, violations of people who are suffering in areas.
And basically I was using other means to do political activism already. So I never defined myself as a journalist because I never pretended to be totally objective or neutral. I mean, the films I was making were part of more general campaign on human rights issue, be it in Eastern Europe or in Africa, in Rwanda especially.
But then we can say you simply continued, but making less film and making more meetings, let's say. But you are the chair and also the main initiator of this INGE committee. So now for our watchers, European Parliament and European institutions tend to have strange abbreviations for meetings. The INGE committee is an investigation committee on foreign interference
in our democracies. And actually, I remember it was in July 2019, the first group meeting we had at the beginning of our mandate. And I made the suggestion to create a committee that will investigate foreign interference in our democracies because actually, I was fed up that we would make as if we were surprised every time we heard that Putin was financing far-right movements in Europe or getting involved in election processes or in public campaigns. And I thought that our main role, beyond the fact that in this parliament we have strong disagreements with conservatives, with liberals or with other movements, our common role and mission was to preserve our democracies and to make sure that we press the button pause, we establish the diagnosis of what is at stake and what are the threats, and we try to make our democracy better.
So 2019, you mentioned rightly, now it's 2022, and we are still surprised how big the quantity of disinformation, interference is. And I think we are facing now a political phase with the Russian war on Ukraine, which is not only a war with tanks, weapons, bombs, but it's also a war of disinformation and information war.
Yeah, and actually the disinformation and the cyber attacks, it started before armies stepped in. So you had a virtual war that turned into a material, physical, old-fashioned war. And that's very important for everybody to understand in Europe, is that all these cyber attacks, all this disinformation campaign, all this political financing, it's part of a general confrontation that authoritarian regimes have with the EU democracies. And this new form of warfare is actually making all the traditional borders and frontiers we had in our mind blurry and vague. So we are not at war with Russia, but for a long time, in fact, we were not at peace anymore, without even noticing it. We had the habit of distinguishing foreign policy and internal politics, outside, inside. This goes without any meaning now, because when you have a foreign power, for instance, that is financing, patronizing, helping all anti-establishment, populistic, far-right movements all across Europe, then it's not anymore a foreign policy issue. It means that this foreign actor is coming inside and trying to destabilize your institutions from the inside. And so that's why our work was so important, and I'm so happy we work so well together. It's because we have to make sure Putin cannot destabilize our democracies, but we also have to name, shame, and fight against Europe and enablers of Putin's strategy.
So the thesis is also that dictatorships or non-democratic states want to destabilize functioning Western democracies. Or Southern, like in the Balkans. And they have, it's not only, let's say, Mr. Putin, or we can also speak about other countries, maybe, but it's also that they, some with surprise, we have to see, surprise is not so much surprise anyway, that also from inside, they have collaborators. They managed in the last decade to finance also their friends.
And which is crazy is that these friends of Putin, and of the regime, but of Putin, who is the main actor of that, they keep giving us lessons on how patriotic they are and how unpatriotic we are, because we defend, for instance, multicultural society or human rights or rule of law. And they explain to us that, you know, me as FPO, I'm the real Austrian patriot. Me as National Front or National Rally, I am the real French patriot. And the same in Italy, the same in Germany. And at the end of the day, they end up what? Working for a foreign tyrant that is hostile to our principles and our interests, the interests and principles of our nations and of our common European space. So basically, we were shy, I think, and our political response to them was weak for a very long period, as if we were buying this shit that they were selling to us. And we should call a cat, and when they speak, we should look at them in the eyes and say, but who gave you these elements of language? Seriously, where does it come from? It comes from abroad. And who supports you? Troll farms in St. Petersburg. And this is really something that we need to understand. We can have disagreements. We don't think the same way that others are thinking. But there is a very, very, very strong nature separation between having disagreements and working against our states, working against our democracies, working for foreign power.
The question if it is only a paradoxical or if this is the classical hypocrisy of this kind of people. Huh? They also say we are defending the poor people in our societies while they are taking the money for their own books. They say we are fighting corruption while they are the most corrupted one. They are against for a hard anti-drug policy, and then suddenly some pictures showing up that they are the most strongest user of drugs in political sphere, and so anyway, there are some kind of...
That's the lesson of history with far-right movements. I mean, that has always been the case. Look at far-right movements in the history of French collaboration. I mean, so
it's true.
They were explaining that Popular Front was really a betrayal of French nation, and that Léon Blum was a Jew who was foreign to French tradition, and then they all ended up speaking German very quickly. In 1940. So that's, and before that, I mean, we have a very long tradition in France of that. Those who stood up against the revolution, I don't want to make a lesson of history, but you know where they were, and it's quite symbolic. They went, the hardcore anti-revolution forces, they went to St. Petersburg, and they were hosted by the Tsar. And from there, they started to explain that French Revolution was a betrayal of French nation. So from Russia, they were fighting with Russian troops to invade France. They were actually
pure French.
they were actually explaining to us. I mean, I was not there, obviously, but that we were betraying French tradition.
Let's say in modern times, it is not any longer black and white pictures. Now it's full color pictures on the internet, on Instagram. But we have the same. No, we have Marine Le Pen. Hugging Putin, we have...
But not only hugging, I mean, she has a debt of 8 million euros to oligarchs close to Putin. So you have a French candidate for presidency who owes money to Putin's regime. I mean, how independent will she be if she gets elected? Yeah, that's a very strong question, and how can we tolerate that? And that's why in the reports of our committee, we clearly speak about foreign money pouring into European politics, because if you are paid by these regimes, I mean, at the end of the day, are you sure you will be handling foreign policy and in the name of European interest and French interest, or something else?
Yeah, and why you were hiding it all your life and not simply saying, okay, I'm best friend, that's why I take money. So, but maybe we can spend 1 minute in these findings of the report, because I think we have to say this report usually reports of the European Parliament produces a lot of reports. And usually it is only a tiny group of people who takes importance and notice even of this report. This kind of INGE report, it was reported everywhere all over Europe, because the European Parliament was very clearly. So the findings were, we have loopholes. It's the far right, which are the allies of anti-democratic external movements, with party financing loopholes. So we need stronger rules of foreign money. But we also discovered that, let's say, the European Union is not prepared to fight cyber attacks, foreign interference.
Yeah, and I think it got a huge impact, this report, because first, the level of the threat is not well understood everywhere. And suddenly to see a general diagnosis saying, okay, that's what we are facing, and that's the level of threat on our democracies, and that's the cyber attacks on hospitals in Ireland during the pandemic, or that's the political financing. When you see it together, suddenly you understand, I mean, how grave the situation is. But also, I think it got traction in the public debate, thanks mostly to you, I must say. I mean, but because you were a rapporteur on this, and we fought together so that, contrary to the habits of this house, the European Parliament, there is a unwritten rule that we should not name things.
Exactly.
And that the reports should always be vague, general. And what we insisted on together, and you waged the fight, and it was quite difficult, I remember, at some points, it's to name the enablers. To name first the hostile foreign actors, clearly, and Russia, China, and others, and the structures that are doing that for Russia, China, and others, and the enablers here. And there was a discussion, like, wow, don't name political parties. And we stood strong on that. No, you are taking their money, you are supporting foreign actors trying to destabilize our democracy. You should be named, you should be shamed, you should be responding of your action. And this is also why it got traction. And also, we have shown, when we speak about the elite capture, for instance, and the former officials who went to work for hostile foreign interests, we have shown that if they were from our political family, we don't have trouble naming them either. And so, and we were the ones insisting so that names will come in, even if they come from the left. And this was also important, and that's why people believed in our sincerity too.
I think it's important. We named, just to repeat, we named those which starting Russia, China, others. We named the structures of social media platforms. We named the enabler on political field, and we named the individual which are in this problem, which I think we put in also new in this report, elite capture, which is structurally, of course, more difficult than cyber attacks. but also I think we started there an European-wide also discussion on how politicians should work for companies and
yes, because you cannot go and work for Gazprom when you had such high responsibility in European countries' establishment, or for Huawei or others in a normal way. And the thing is that, you know, when we were saying it, people were looking at us a bit like skeptical, and suddenly. War in Ukraine, invasion, wake up call. Europeans understand, oh my God, we are so dependent on Russian gas, and oh my God, all these interests have penetrated the European system, and you had all these people resigning.
Exactly. So except a few.
Except Gerhard Schröder, for instance. But this is why our position was right, and also to name them, because what made them resign and made them understand the problem is public pressure. And we are social democrats. I mean, we need to have public involvement in the democratic debate and putting pressure on their leaders.
Exactly. I think we already come to an end of our talk. As you have, so first maybe for our watchers which got interested in all this work, you can find the report on our web pages. You can find it on the webpage of the European Parliament. And we have to say, we continue with the work.
Yeah, it's so important, you know.
And it will be again Raphaël Glucksmann, who is the chair of this committee.
And I hope we will work together.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, and it's very important to understand that democracies are not a given. They are not natural.
No.
If you don't stand for them, if you don't fight for them, if you don't defend them, then they might collapse. So it's our duty, our sacred duty, to protect our democracies and make them better.
And these democracies are extremely strong, but should never be naive that they, let's say, by themselves surviving. And it's better to act early than to act lately.
Yeah.
But one democratic question, French elections coming up in April. I don't know if it's fair now in 1 minute or 2 minutes to get an analysis, but it seems, is Mrs. Le Pen completely out now with this publishing of her Putin closeness?
No, she's not completely out, but I think there is much less possibility of far-right winning the elections now, after the war in Ukraine, than there was before. But it's a very strong movement in Europe. And you can see it even on the discussion on Ukraine. All this fake news, disinformation campaign, and every time we have to fight to bring back people to reality. And it makes us lose energy and time. We should be thinking now how we can help Ukraine to survive, how we can protect peace and democracy in Europe. And what we are doing is fight back on totally crazy things, like it was the same on vaccines.
Exactly.
That are popping up everywhere, explaining that Ukrainians kill so many people for so long and that they are all Nazis, and all of that comes from St. Petersburg and Moscow. So we have to protect our public debate too. And in France, there is a very strong and deep tendency for the far right. So it will not disappear in one day. It's a very long political fight, and I think Democrats have been too weak, too naive, and also I would say that they have allowed our city to become more and more unfair, and which fuels far right. So it's time for us to be seriously Democrats and seriously social too.
So maybe we do the analysis of French elections after the first round, or maybe in between. There is a lot of questions, also the role of the left, which we can probably for sure not answer now today in 1 minute.
Yeah, don't get your people depressed.
No, exactly. So this depressing melange.
But it will come back. I mean, it will come back. The only thing is we have to understand that reality has totally changed, and period that is coming will be very grave, and we will need to really propose something else that will make our democracy survive this moment and regenerate. And I think that we have something in common all across Europe, and in France, it will rise again from the ashes, I'm sure.
Perfect. So it was, I think, a very vital melange talk, but also it's necessary because a vital democracy needs also vital politicians. Thank you, Raphaël, for joining today. Merci beaucoup.
Bravo, quel accent.
Ja, accent Belgique. Okay, now my French teacher will be now happy with this assessment from you, with good action. Danke fürs Zuschauen. We will have it also as podcast and as video, and see you next time. Danke, Raphaël.
Bye.